All right. Well, welcome everybody. Thanks for joining us on at least what's here, a somewhat warm summer evening. Hopefully you're in air conditioning if you're near me. We're excited to talk about the Catalyst program. I'm assuming that's why you're here, that you're interested in biomedical innovation from a variety of vantage points. So my name is Martha Gray. I've been involved in Catalyst for 14-ish years. I've been one of many faculty who have developed it over the years, and you're going to meet some people that have been involved. And so my job now is to maybe give you a perspective of what it is we try to do in Catalyst and how we think about the world. But I'd like to not spend too much time with that, so you can talk to people who are served and have been in Catalyst as fellows as well as faculty. So let me just start by sharing and see if I can get that all to work. Hopefully you're all seeing the slides that I'm hoping to show.
Yes.
And now I just need to get rid of all these Zoom paraphernalia on my slide. Okay. So our real goal in Catalyst is to get you to the point where you can do something, we call it a project in the end, that has impact. And we assume that's why you're here. And you know, I think most of us go into life, if you do projects or research or something, we want to do something great. That's the idea. The challenge is just thinking you want to do something great does not really help you get there. Even when people say, okay, I want you to do something great, that's not that helpful. And so for us, the real issue and the real challenge and the real opportunity is to not think about what specifically you will do, but think about how do you develop a community where you can develop what it is you want to do and vet it and make sure that you really do have something, an idea that people really care about and want to do. And I mention the people because in a way that people are the most important thing. And the reason is in order to do something that matters, in our experience, it's almost impossible to do it by yourself. You need to do it with people. And part of doing it with people is that's what helps you to think differently. And thinking differently, as every innovation book will tell you, is that's a piece that's just critical to innovation. And a way to think about why that's the case is that we come to life with this idea of having a mind map. That's the experiences we've had, the domain knowledge we've had, and so forth. And that provides the context for really your decision making. So let me give you an example, let's say of a clinician. Even if you're not a clinician, you can imagine being a clinician walking into a patient encounter. So you not only use the medical facts that you have, but you respond to that interaction based on your prior experience with the patient, with the disease, with the institution. And that interaction is really what I mean when we say we're guided by your mind map. Now, your mind map continues to change over time as because of your experience, because of what you learn and the kinds of interactions you've had. And really, again, to go back to this, the idea of innovation, to promote innovation is to build out your mind map in areas that it is not now well populated, because that's going to increase the likelihood of innovation. So looked at a different way, and maybe the most common way, it's the idea that the broader your worldview, and the more clear your worldview, the better positioned you'll be to figure out where the real opportunities are for innovation. This picture makes it maybe seem easy to understand, but what's really true is that you only have your worldview. That stuff outside is simply invisible, but you're still going to fill in the dots. And that is really where you can make, many assumptions and mistakes and things that are not going to head you where you want to go. And in some ways, one of the most, everybody shares the experience, I'm imagining, of talking to somebody younger than them, talking to a teenager, and you try to explain to them what it's like to be an adult. I mean, there's no words you can use, no way they can explain it. They have not had that experience. You can't develop the mind map. And that same idea holds for if you're trying to innovate in medicine, you have no experience in medicine. You need to be, shoulder to shoulder with people who have it so you can understand that. You need to get yourself immersed in that. And it goes for really every single thing that you want to learn. And so often, my colleagues deal with people who are thinking about innovative products. They come to the office and they say, I want to do this thing to help pediatrics. Have you ever talked to a pediatrician? No, but I know it's really important. They'll get my device. So I'm not trying to belittle it, but I think that the part that people don't talk about when they've been successful is how much it depended on interacting with other people to really understand the problems they're going to solve and the context in which they need to be solved. So that's what we do in Catalyst. We really bring people together so that you can, and a process together to help you do that. So in Catalyst, you're going to expand your mind map, and I think we'll hear from fellows and faculty that this happens. And the way you do it is by working together to advance human health. That's the main idea. So there is a process, right? Again, essential is that you come together as people, is about changing you. The process has a number of phases. So the first phase is when what we call it new project discovery, phase 1, where a cohort of fellows, usually a dozen or so fellows, join and spend that 6-month time developing a portfolio of 3 or 4 project proposals. There's a lot that happens along the way, but you come out of that with a project proposal. Then you enter what we call phase 2, which is where you actually do the project. So phase 1 is not an exercise, it's actually to get to something that you know it's worth spending the time to do it. And during the execution, you continue to gather evidence now that can help people invest at various levels in your project. And then at some point, usually a couple of years, it graduates to independence in a variety of ways, project dependent, it scales, and then ultimately has impact. So that's the vision that we have. And what you're applying for now is initially to get into phase 1, but I think if you really want to do this, think about making sure that you can, if it all works out for you, that you can be in a position to do the actual project, because that mindset's important. During that phase 1, again, the goal is to come up with a research project that is to do something worth doing. So we begin just trying to understand, what do people really need? What's going to matter? The second is, it says proof of opportunity here, but it's a solution that's matched to the need. So you can have lots of needs. If you have no solution, you don't have an opportunity. But if you get those two and they're tightly coupled, then you have an opportunity. Then to do something, you actually need a proposal. Like, given this is what I would do the first 3 months and the second 3 months to actually make it happen, to actualize that opportunity. And that's what we do during that first 6 months. It's straightforward to put it on a slide. It's not linear and it's not easy. A question that we asked, I think, the very first session is thinking about what the bad outcome is. If you are trying to solve a problem, there must be something that's happening now that you don't want to happen anymore. What is that? Who is experiencing that? And if you fix it, how are they better off? And would you even know if they're better off? Again, those questions sound straightforward, but they can be really tricky and nuanced to understand at a level. And we do it together. This picture is from an early session from a number of years ago. And at this table are fellows. The faculty come from a wide variety in this picture. There's somebody who's a neurologist, somebody who's a biotech entrepreneur, a physicist, a radiologist, a biological scientist, and a computer scientist. And those are the ones I picked out. But we do have a broad range, and those are really essential to trying to answer those questions. At the end, what we think about is, to repeat some of what I said, is, do you have a need? If you actually solve this problem, would somebody really care? Is that improvement valuable to somebody? And if you have a solution, is it matched? Is it really going to address the problem you've laid out? It's surprisingly easy to come up with a solution on a technology you like that really is not the appropriate solution for the problem you've identified. So those things need to match. Can be risky, but it needs to match. And then again, a plan. And so we're not talking about getting to the point where you have preliminary data, but just getting to something that's vetted so that you're doing the work to decide whether it's worth actually doing the project. The ideal project, and virtually every project falls in this category, in addition to those, they involve multiple stakeholders. I can't think of a project that has ever emerged where only one kind of expertise is relevant. It just never happens. Very often they do require scientific inquiry, sometimes really frank science. You have to do the science to figure out the answer to the question to know which way to go on a solution concept, right? Others less so, but the notion that kind of having to do some level of scientific inquiry, not something you just put together in an evening on your kitchen table. We found that by identifying the need, that the potential for funding can be high, but there's some, clearly to do a project requires some funding. So can you engage, or can we imagine a path to funding? And the kind of timeline we're looking at is a project that can show proof of principle in something less than 5 years. So we're not looking at 50-year horizon projects. Why do we focus so much on this? It's because doing something that matters is something to consider throughout, and especially early on. So this is a version of a chart that shows up in many, many articles about startups, that the #1 startup mistake is you're building something nobody actually wants. So we may not be building a product in the startup sense, but we are doing work that should lead to a solution, and we should have some level of confidence that if we're successful in doing it, that somebody will want it. And so that's why we spend a ton of time validating these unmet medical needs and getting the evidence needed for your solution concept and whether that will work. For those of you who are in academia or have been in academia and are thinking about it in that more classical sense, I just want to highlight some things that differentiate. So, the first is, if you've gone and done research in academia, usually you go and you join a particular lab and you do whatever that lab does, right? This is not that. It's not defined or constrained. You have the freedom to optimize between different specialties and technologies. There's no expectation that you work in exactly your area of highest expertise. In fact, sometimes it's better to be a little bit adjacent because you're more likely to be open-minded about what the possibilities are. Because we have diverse backgrounds, that really plays into, as I said before, the creativity it takes to identify problems and find the solutions. And that's true during phase 1 when we have multiple fellows on projects. And it also is true in phase 2 when you grow your team and it's larger than the initial PIs. Again, I've drawn it very linearly. Projects may pivot several times. They probably always do pivot several times, sometimes many, many times. And again, we're not here about getting preliminary data, but validating that it's worth doing. Since actually doing the project is important, I just want to spend a couple minutes on what phase 2 is. When you exit phase 1, it's the case that you have a group of fellows that can work on the project, but they don't have all the expertise or all the bandwidth needed to actually do the project. So an initial part of getting into this phase 2 is to think about who can you bring onto your team so that you have the brain power and the time available to work on it. You continue to evolve your project strategy, you make a case for investment is what that should say, and graduate then ultimately to independence. After Catalyst, regardless of when you exit, the teams exit phase 1 with carefully planned projects that are focused on healthcare. And even after phase 1 alone, fellows tell us that they're transformed. They have a much deeper understanding, not only on how to think about innovation, but they generally report to us they've learned a lot about their strengths, their challenges. They have a new perspective on how they want to think about their goals and their career horizons. There's a huge amount of this through the work of doing real work of doing innovative projects of professional development, and that can go in virtually any direction. We have lots of evidence this works. I'm going to talk about some historical data that from early on in the first implementation. where we had a number of projects that went into phase 2, just to give you a sense of what happened. So in this grouping of 4 cohorts, there were 34 actual fellows that started. They created, at the end of phase 1, 16 projects. They engaged 50 mentors about, and through the projects themselves, brought in a whole lot of others. So it seems small when you think about your cohort, but the kind of network growth you get and the people you can work with can expand relatively rapidly. And I should say that when we do this, we're not telling you a particular medical domain or technology domain, and our observation is our collection is really diverse by those medical domain, technology domain, the time to translation, and so forth. So healthcare is our theme, but it's not narrowed down. These projects have been very successful in getting follow-on funding, and that's true of the current implementation as well. And the translation rate has been very, very high. So of those, fully half of them have either been part of a startup company or has been licensed to an existing company. And to put that number in perspective, this is far higher than you traditionally see in research kind of settings. And it's not about it being translational. I think it's really that our eye is on the goal of doing problems that have that people care about, which is an absolutely essential element for translation, and that we're continually focusing on that, and that accelerates your path. And again, back to the changing the way you think, this is what we get both from formal education research as well as anecdotal evidence that people have changed their trajectories and change who they know, change how they think about the world. I'm going to give you one quick example. A project which, when they were in Catalyst, they were called Team NeuroQWERTY, and their idea was to, in a passive way, evaluate motor function, in particular to pick up changes that would be associated with Parkinson's disease. This says early onset, it could do that. The original driving motivation was actually to be able to evaluate therapeutic efficacy. And so this is the idea was they could do this by looking at motion with tablet and type devices or computers or phones, because the motor response is involuntary and related to that disease. So that's where they got, and they've been successful, and it's now a startup company. But where they began was very, very different. So to emphasize, this isn't linear. They started out thinking about people making radiology errors, and they were trying to think about a technology involving eye movements to detect fatigue. And then they went to air traffic controllers because the radiology errors wasn't getting any traction. But then they went back to radiology errors, picked a different thing. How do they type? And then fine motor control. And then they did to something which, in parentheses, is typing patterns. So just to say that, their objective was to do something that would make a difference that people cared about. And by continually ask that question, what's the bad outcome, et cetera, they went through a lot of back and forth and wound up with that project. Finally, just to, again, emphasize some of the differences between a traditional research and what happens in Catalyst. In traditional research, you're focused on producing new knowledge. We want improved healthcare outcomes. Traditionally, what are you an expert in? Go with what you know. Don't do anything else. Stick in your lane. We're like, you're smart. You've done, many of you had various degrees of education, but you've learned a lot over the years. You have a full mind map. Like, it's amazing how that can be brought to bear in projects that are not obviously in your sweet spot of expertise. It can be adjacent or even slightly distant. And the incentives are really about solving the problem from the best means available. In traditional case, there's a professor or a principal investigator, somebody like that in charge. They decide the program, they hire everybody, and they do everything. This is you. You come up with the program. We don't tell you what to do. We tell you what we think, but we don't tell you what to do. You ultimately decide on the projects that end up in your portfolio and the one you're going to do. And so you're able to deploy resources in ways that match your career and your interests and so forth. And we're not trying to reinforce the silos that exist in really any organization. You're going to have to find ways to work across different professional and disciplinary boundaries. and to figure out how to do things. So, and finally, even though we call the people that are supporting you faculty, it is not a hierarchical training system. Faculty stay involved because we learn so much every year, and the fellows learn. It's truly a 360 experience. Just go quickly through an incubator. Some people come in with a product thinking, okay, well, this is an incubator. Well, there the purpose is I have a product and I want to get out to commercial market. That's not what we're doing. We're trying to figure out if it's even worth it for the impact. And you join with a particular solution. We want you to come together with an interest in doing it. You might have some ideas, but this is not about bringing your specific idea. If you have that idea, it may or may not make it ultimately to the final portfolio, because that would be just be in the mess of the process, and maybe it will, maybe it won't. So if you're thinking, I have this product and I want to use this program to do this, this is not that there are programs for that. This is not that. This is really your most 99% of you will come up with a new project as a result of this experience. We don't focus on business model education. We might say some elements of it where they become relevant, but we really are about the logical thinking, the piece of it that says, are you solving an unmet need? Do you have a valid solution concept that could address that need? When you get to phase 2, where we do the research and building a test solution, we may bring in those as relevant to the project. The primary outcome of an incubator is to pitch and get invested. We do ultimately want you to be invested, but the primary outcome from phase 1 is to put you in a position to do a project that ultimately could be invested in. Okay, so for Catalyst 2025, I'm standing here talking. There's a whole group of faculty mentors who support this process and do it. And there are a number of institutions and units within institutions that make this possible. So on the MIT side, there's the Institute for Medical Engineering and Science, which is also about bringing engineering to medicine. It's raison d'etre, and the Office of Innovation. Those are our host institutions. On the VA side, there's the VHA Innovation Ecosystem. And I think I'm now turning it over to Gina to talk about the VA. And before I do that, let me just say, and we draw on resources from all of these institutions, in various ways to help make this happen. So even if you're not VA, you could end up with some VA resources. Even if you're not MIT, you can end up with MIT resources. Okay, Melissa, I see your picture. Gina?
Hi. So I'm Gina Green, and I'm one of the innovation specialists that works in the VA innovation ecosystem. I work out of the VA Northeast Ohio, and this was my first year being involved with the Catalyst. And I can tell you it has really been an amazing experience for me, even sitting on the faculty side, because to echo what Martha said, you learn so much in so many different areas. So this program, the VHA MIT partnership, has been around for 5 years. This is the 5th year, and it really provides a wonderful opportunity to collaborate on in this problem space, these idea spaces. So one of the advantages that I would say for any employee is the ability to work in areas that are not part of your day-to-day job. When we work in the innovation space, a lot of times we are really focused on our one particular area of difficulty or our particular problem. And so this gives you a chance to kind of stretch your muscles a little bit and expand that mind map and really work on areas that you maybe had never thought your skill set would translate into. So it's a really fun opportunity to be able to grow professionally and personally. I love the opportunity to be able to collaborate with so many disciplines. Many of us, when we function as clinicians, we don't have access to the various engineers. Sometimes we don't touch research. Sometimes we can't get in touch with our health scientists or even understand how we can all work together. So you have this experience where you're in a room with everybody who's so like-minded in wanting to make our healthcare space better, and yet they all bring such different skills and abilities to develop and create some really amazing projects. So learning about some of the innovation methodology that's out there and then having the opportunity to apply it while having the resources of MIT and this wonderful group of faculty to help provide some guidance is really just a fantastic opportunity. And I'm encouraging so many people in my own facility to apply for this program. So you're going to find that your experiences help to change your mindset and change your skill set. You are going to learn and grow and develop. And many of the fellows have responded in like ways where they've said, I never realized how much it would change me on a personal level. And maybe it's made me a better provider as a physician, or maybe it's made me a better therapist or a better engineer because I've had the opportunity to kind of stretch and learn, just whatever their project happened to be. And so the trajectory of many fellows' careers have changed. One, I'm not going to call her out, but one of our fellows this year is really considering changing where she was going to going back to med school. So that's pretty significant. And Catalyst helped to solidify that idea for her. And the projects are real. There's real work being done in this innovation space. This is benefiting our patients and our world. And today, a little bit later on the call, we're going to be able to hear from some of the fellows that have real prototypes that are get in various phases of development and testing. I believe we have Dr. Paul Albier, Laura Major, and Dr. Robbie Roslingham. And they've got some really cool projects that I like to hear about them, even though I've listened to different presentations. It's always interesting on what level they've moved into. So you're going to get to hear from them, and I'm sure have a chance to answer some questions. We also have other VA fellows on that were in this year's cohort, and they can tell you about their experiences and share a little bit about what they've learned. And so this slide really talks about the opportunities. And I love that it says, I lit up my brain. It's been so valuable. And it gives you the opportunity to innovate in a new space. And it's a very supportive environment that encourages you to progress and grow and think outside the box. So I love the Catalyst program. I've really enjoyed being part of it. And I think that it offers so much to our VA community and those who are outside the VA that are lucky enough to participate. This is a great experience. And so I encourage you all to please ask questions, reach out. Any VA specific questions, you're welcome to reach out to myself, or Melissa can direct you to another innovation specialist as well, but we're happy to help in any way we can.
Great, thank you, Gina. Now I'm going to just do some nuts and bolts of what happens. And so Catalyst for 2025 starts on Monday, January 6th. And phase one, it will conclude on July 2nd. The things you need to know is we have our regular sessions on Wednesdays from 10 to 1. And then there's group discussions where you can meet with your colleagues. We ask that you hold Mondays 10 to 11. We had a recent discussion today whether we should suggest you hold longer than that. But at any rate, the ones where we all meet together and do a lot of content is Wednesdays from 10 to 1. There are 3 times where we come together in person. That's in January, the 21st, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday of that week. In February, the 20th, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday of that week. And these are all on the website. It is actually, as it says on the website, the February one might be at a place other than MIT. But the key thing is we come together, and those are really important work sessions to make a lot of progress. There's a limit to what can happen remotely. In terms of workload, it's about 10 to 15 hours a week, probably leaning to the 15 hours a week. Honestly, you can ask the fellows. That includes the scheduled time. There are ad hoc meetings that you and other people that you're working with may have with faculty or others. There's certainly independent work time. We ask that you really think about this as a year commitment. Some of you would say after 6 months, I've learned a lot about myself. I'm going to go on in this direction, and this isn't for me. And clearly, we're not going to hold you to it. But most stay on, and they stay on for more than a year. So I just want to make sure that you come in with that kind of set. It's not a class for 6 months. It is an experience. And as Gina said, just a real world experience that's mentored. We're lucky to have some donors and partners that enable us to offer this tuition free. If you have the money for tuition, we would take it. So just to say, but we do not expect that of you. We do, for the intensifications, of course, travel for most of you will be required. If you're in the VA, the innovation ecosystem can support that travel. For non-VA, we ask you to absorb that expense. If that would prevent you from participating, you should just reach out to Melissa. We don't want that to be the reason you can't participate. And in the past, this has not turned out to be a problem. The process involves, some of you have submitted an expression of interest. If you want to meet somebody to talk about it, we're happy to do that. The actual online application is due on the 5th of August. From that, we will invite many of you to interviews. Though those are the week of August 20, or the invitations will go out the week of August 23rd for the interviews on September 6th. So if you apply, please block your calendar on September 6th. Block the whole day. We won't take your whole day, but block it so that we can get the schedule in. We'll announce selections mid-September, and we'll ask you to commit by mid-October so that you can get all your ducks in a row to participate. So I want to stop now with the stuff, and the last stuff is all on the website. So, but really give a chance for the past and current fellows to talk about what's their experience here, and for other faculty to chime in as needed. So I'm going to stop sharing and turn things over to Gali, who's a current fellow, to moderate that. Thank you, Ga.
Hello. Nice to meet you. My name is Ga, and I was one of the fellows in the 2024 cohort. So I'll be moderating, but we have Audie, Paul, Michelle, Laura, and Sherman, who are the fellows, who are going to give reflections. I see that we have 2 to 3 minutes per fellow, so I'll get started and I'll popcorn over to the next person, and I'll kind of introduce who's next after. So my name is Ga. I mentioned that I was part of the 2024 cohort. I'm currently an MD PhD student at Harvard Medical School, and I'm doing my PhD at MIT doing chemistry. The project I worked on during Catalyst in 2024 was tackling aspiration pneumonia in patients post-stroke. So upon talking with stakeholders, including physicians, speech-language pathologists, nurses, dentists, it seemed that there was a link between inpatient oral health and aspiration pneumonia risk that has been previously explored in ICUs, but not for the specific patient population that we're interested in. So we're currently exploring ways to leverage this unexplored link. And I'm currently at an extended phase 1 to still continue exploring the need and brainstorming solutions for a prototype idea. My key reflection from the whole Catalyst experience was that Catalyst really does what we oftentimes skip in research, which is to really go down as far down the pathway as possible once you have an idea or a hunch, and try to measure concretely what the real impact it would be of that idea and hunch. So this is definitely, I've learned that a muscle that needs to be exercised. And I couldn't be more than happy to have done the exercise with the cohort that I got to meet. And I'll hand it over to Audie next, and I'll introduce the next person after.
Thanks, Ga. So, hey everyone, I'm Adi Chandrasekhar. I am a clinician, a primary care physician by training. I work at Fenway Health in Boston. I also work part-time for a startup called Primary Health. I'm also part of the same cohort, so the most recent one from 2024. I actually have 2 projects that I've worked on at present. So one of them involves in a space of opioid overdoses to think about how technology could help develop a solution for detecting opioid overdoses early to reduce the number of deaths. I think it's a great example of something that has potentially a very high impact in the real world and real need. And my other project actually is the one that Ga just mentioned, which we're in an extended phase 1, and that one, the opioid project, is hopefully moving to phase 2 pretty soon. We'll hear back formally soon. I'd say in terms of reflections, my background is purely clinical. So I come from the world of clinical medicine, public health, startups. I don't have much of a research lens. It really was amazing to have this opportunity to interact with a cohort that is so diverse, particularly folks that don't have the clinical background. I think we don't get that chance to interact that often with folks that have a basic science or an engineering background, which I think is critical to innovating. So I've truly enjoyed that process. And even within the cohort, both in terms of the diversity of our expertise, but also the diversity of our lived experiences and the fact that we're all in very, very different stages of our careers, I think has been very, very illuminating for me personally. So I will stop there and let God pass it on to the next person.
Thanks, Audie. Next we have Paul.
Hi, I'm Paul Albert. I'm a plastic surgeon in Tampa, Florida with the James A. Haley VA in Tampa. I'm from Catalyst Cohort 2023. I'm in phase 2 currently with the development of a prototype. Our concept was dealing with pressure injuries. And like Martha said, it went through a lot of changes from focusing on a bed and trying to make a bed and how difficult that is to finally really coming to a sensor dealing with the microclimate that's dealing at pressure points on a paralyzed individual. And it took a lot of time to find the real job to be done to really define what we wanted to find. But it allowed us to bring a lot of people together that were different than me, being predominantly a clinician, to really find the problem, define it, and to move it forward. Reflection-wise, because everyone said a lot of what I would already have said so far, and you'll hear that a lot of repetition, because I think everyone grew from it. I think our mind map changed immensely. I think Martha would admit I probably had a lot of biases coming into the system, and it had to do with my clinical surgical mind that needed to look a little more open and to say why a little more often than just think I knew the answer. And I think that's where I grew in the reflection the most. My background has been medicine and then with a business degree involved with startups. And I think this allowed me to take a big step from a startup. And even when I evaluate startups now, I look at them differently than I ever did. So it definitely helped me with the projection of my business mind and when I'm looking at things that angel investors are looking at to invest in. It really opened up that whole, is this really worth it or not? And what are you really answering with this problem? And really digging into it. So I think it really developed that part of me that I didn't have. As for my prototype in phase 2, we're meeting in Boston next week. We have developed a few iterations of the prototype. We've got hardware that we're actually working on with sensors, and the VA has allowed us to use the space at both Tampa and Boston to use surfaces to work with the sensor to see if it really works. And it's been very exciting, very sprint-like, and getting together and working towards a project. So it's been definitely changing. So I'll leave it there and let someone else speak.
Thank you very much. Next we have Michelle.
Hi, good evening, everyone. My name is Michelle Petrovic. I'm also from the 2024 cohort. I am an anesthesiologist still actively practicing at the Orlando VA. I'm also the director of medical simulation for the Orlando VA healthcare system. So I came into this fellowship with a completely open mind. I did not feel the need to have my project focus on something that was directly related to anesthesia. And in fact, I engaged in 4 projects over the course of this fellowship. One having to do with cardiac devices, pacemakers, and defibrillators and their perioperative emergent management. Another having to do with pneumothoraces and interventional radiology procedures. And then I've continued on to the end here with 2 projects, one focusing on traumatic brain injury and the sleep patterns of those patients, and the other having to do with opioid and respiratory depression patterns. So I really kind of gave it my all. I decided to be very broad in exposing myself to different projects and different individuals at the beginning, and then to narrow down from there to see what best aligned with what I was interested in. I have so many reflections. I've got a bunch of them written here, but for time's sake, I'll just share a few and then perhaps more with the questions that you may ask. So I am mid-career. I've been practicing anesthesia for 20 years. I've pretty much mastered the art and science of anesthesia. So engaging in a fellowship like this was really allowing me to have a new challenge and acquire a new set of skills. And while I have worked with multidisciplinary and interprofessional groups throughout my clinical career, I really wanted to expand that to more than just the clinical folks. And so I was able to achieve that through this program. I would say this program is not for the faint of heart. The time commitment can be equivalent to that of a part-time job, but the rewards from it are extremely incredible. The faculty is amazing, and I would say the best way to think of it is taking on a hobby, because a hobby, you don't mind doing it on the weekends, on holidays, in the evenings. So I think that's the best way to think about it.
Thank you so much, Michelle. Very eloquently said. Next we have Laura.
Hello, good evening from Tampa, Florida, where it's a temperate 98 degrees at 6:30. So it's been my privilege to be part of the 2023 cohort along with Paul. I am also mid-career. I'm neuropsychiatry, currently at a clinic for mostly spec ops guys with TBI and PTSD. To segue a little bit on what Michelle was saying, I'm at the stage where it would be possible to basically phone it in and do the same thing that I have been doing until I retire, but I don't know if it's a sign of stupidity or intelligence, but that's just not appealing to do that, to kick back on the laurels and not try anything new. Paul and I are Monty Python fans, and the running joke has been, we're not dead yet. We're not done yet. And so my project currently, along with Dr. Gutierrez in Madrid, is to take physiological data off of wearable sensors. Currently the Oura Ring, I'm not giving anybody the finger, that's just the finger it's on. And use some machine language and AI processing in order to basically get more granular findings about what patterns there are with sleep disturbance and PTSD, and be able to scale those out to average providers and average clinics so that we can make a broader impact than we're currently making. Coming into phase 2, we completed a subject matter expert survey. We're going to publish that and present it next month. We're in the middle of an in vivo trial involving 20 patients. Just put in a grant Monday to hopefully expand that and do a little bit more. And I'm very hopeful that that will happen, but even if it doesn't, it's been a privilege to work with such a diverse and bright set of people. I was trying to think back to where I first spoke to Kike and, how we synced up. And it was actually a conversation at a dinner during the first intensification about patterns of repetition in the Brandenburg concertos. We're both Bach fans, and some AI analysis he'd done in that. And I realized that he would be the perfect guy to work with. And we're very different, but we've gotten along very well, and hopefully we'll get some things done. Same thing, like occasionally get to kind of guest host on Paul's project and weigh in and do a little editing. And they wrote a letter of support for our grant. So even the people that you're not working on their projects, you are continuing to interact and benefit from, knowing these great people. And that's been a tremendous privilege. So thank you.
Thank you so much. As someone currently, on the cusp of phase 2, it was very interesting seeing how far you guys have gotten with the project. Next we have, and then last person, but not least, Sherman.
Hi, I'm Sherman Huang. Actually, I'm not a medical doctor, so I'm actually a professor in computer science and engineering at Worcester Polytechnic. So I joined Catalyst because I was very interested into expanding my research into another dimension, which is the healthcare. So my background is working on AI and computer vision. I don't have any background in, like I said, in medicine. So this is actually through the Catalyst program, I learned a lot from my colleagues like Michelle, like Guy, and Adi, all these they're medical doctors. And this is, you can get even better opportunity to talk to so many medical doctors in one day. And I learned many, many new things. And most importantly is through this opportunity, I engage with them. I learned to work, come up with new innovation ideas. So I work on two projects in this cohort 2024. So I involved in two projects. The first project is in skin cancer detection. So basically, we try to work with the dermatologists. We try to come up a solution that can detect skin cancer early. So as you know, there's 4 million Americans with skin cancer each year. So that's a big impact. Another project, I came up with Michelle. We work on try to for the sleeping problem of a TBI patient, because as you know, the traumatic brain injury is a major issue for soldiers and also for some athletes, professional athletes. So those are very impactful projects, and I'm very happy, our team at the Catalyst, programs, and then we find out this very important project, and then we try to work towards solutions. Another reflection I just want to quickly mention is the people at the Catalyst are amazing. As you mentioned, my colleagues and my team members, they're really, really collaborative, very helpful. We pull out some like 11 p.m. nights, we work on proposals. It's amazing. And finally, our faculty is really, really helpful throughout the process. So it doesn't matter what kind of background, our faculty, including Melissa and I, will help us, a lot through the entire process, at every stage and every presentation before the panels. So it's a great learning experience. I learned a lot, and I really appreciate this opportunity. Thanks.
Thank you, Sherman. So I think those are all the fellows that we have. Thank you, everyone, for your insights. I hope that helped give some perspective into what kinds of projects we're working on, where they're at, and any reflections that we've had. I'm always amazed, what reflections people can come up with, because even the reflections can be so diverse, and we learn from each other, even during the reflections. So I'll hand it back to Melissa on that note.
Well, thank you. I think, oh, it sounds like Martha was going to jump in.
Oh, no, it's fine. I saw a number of questions in the chat that maybe we can start with going through it. But if you want to raise your hand, if you want to just ask your question verbally, and because there's a lot of stuff in the chat, I can't swear that I'll catch them all. So please make sure we do answer them. Let's see. I think there was one that had something to do with how do we test the viability, feasibility, impact on the projects? Where does that feedback come from? A variety of things. I'll let maybe some other faculty contribute to that, the answer. Some of it is the back and forth we have on those Wednesdays between everybody in the room, fellows and the faculty mentors. But also we'll ask you to go out and talk to people who are living this and try to get some evidence through those kinds of interviews, as well as, of course, desk kind of research. So if Jason Wu, if that answers your question, if it doesn't answer your question, please ask. And I think I saw Mara here. Mara, are you here? Do you want to give some further answer to that?
Yeah, actually, hold on one second. I need you to repeat it because my boss was just slacking me. Because technically this is my work time.
Okay. All right. Well, the real question is, how do we give feedback on things like viability, feasibility, impact? How does that happen as we move forward in phase one?
Yeah. So I think a lot of what I've experienced, and just for everyone on this call, this was also my first year as faculty. And so this is just my initial experience with it. A lot of times we don't necessarily give you direct feedback, but we may ask you, what does the literature say? Or where do you think you can find the answer to that question? How do you make sure that you've engaged the appropriate stakeholders who would be interested in the problem that you're trying to solve to get the data that you need to internalize to be able to answer a lot of those questions yourself. And so it's not like homework in the sense that like you turn something in and we say A, B, C, D, or, you know, but really it's more getting you to understand the process of who do you need to be engaging with? What are the resources that you have to identify the answers that you're looking for? And then synthesizing all of that and bringing it back.
Thank you.
Yeah, this is Jason.
Go ahead.
Just to elaborate a little bit further, because it feels like that, you know, a lot of the early phases around simply just, you know, bouncing ideas and getting that opportunity to work with other mindsets, right? Other viewpoints and perspectives. And I guess the question is more along as the line, you know, what keeps somebody from, you know, a few folks going off the deep end, right? 3 folks get really crazy and start building something that nobody else wants, right? How do you, where's the feedback that comes in where, you know, the passion for the folks that are working together begins to get tempered or supported?
Well, if you want to build something crazy that nobody wants, I think you will get a lot of pushback, but the fellows can answer how that feels.
Yeah, that's a little bit, you know, going extreme, but the idea.
Yeah, that's exactly what we're trying to avoid, but it's an dynamic process, as you can imagine. Hard to explain. So.
And I guess one thing I will just say is the amount of work that goes into these projects. If you've got 1 or 2 people who are super vocal and gung ho, this is a lot of work to undertake for a couple of people. And I think that people really understand early on that the groups have to be 4, 5, 6 people in order to really manage all the different parts of what you're going to be asked to do. So going rogue, I suppose someone could try, but it would be more than a part-time job at that point.
Thank you. I want to draw our attention to some hands that are raised. So, and we will get to the questions in the chat, but Heather has been patient. So let's give her the floor for a moment.
Hi.
Hi.
I had a question around funding. So you said that a lot of this was supported. I'm a VA person, but I'm a researcher, so all my time is soft money. So is there FTE support to be part of the fellowship?
So I think what we found, let's talk with you offline and see what would happen, because I think the answer seems to very much depend on people's particular situation. I think it's most robustly worked out for some of the clinical frontline staff. But it is important that you at least be given the time off to do that.
Thank you.
And Juan Pablo.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the thorough presentation. I just had a quick question. If an idea becomes viable and the startup rises out of the idea, who keeps the intellectual property? Does it get divided between the VA and MIT, or do the fellows still get to keep some of the ownership?
So, let's see if I give a short answer to that. To first order, it works the way it works wherever you work now. So most people who have a day job have also assigned all of their intellectual property to whoever that day job is. Not 100%, because not all of you in that situation. So with that in mind, the question is then what rights do you have to be part of making that move forward? We found that the easiest thing to do, but it's not required. So if we didn't do anything, let me start with that. If we didn't do anything, if there were 3 fellows from 3 different institutions that invented something, there would be a 3-way management of that IP with 1 prime and the other 2 working to agree to submit the various levels of patent applications and then to prosecute that to deal with licensing arrangements and so forth. Because of the complexity, that's 3, it could be 5, that becomes a barrier to putting together your intellectual property, we've learned. So what we do now is if you're not in the VA, we ask your permission to have your institution be willing to assign whatever IP you come up with in Catalyst to MIT, and then it would be MIT and the VA, who were strictly speaking the owners. But the process in both institutions is what that means is, should there be any resources that come from that, and that they would go to you in a distribution pattern. It's a little bit different, the VA than MIT, but what you don't have to do is you don't have to come up with the money up front to do all the initial patent work, which can be pretty prohibitive if you're an individual. So that gets covered, and then if you actually monetize it, then you can participate in benefit from that.
Got it. Is there a VA person I can connect with offline just to discuss a couple of more questions?
Yeah, Robbie, do you want to, as somebody who's done it, who's at the VA and has been doing it on the VA, it may be hard, just like if I sent you to the MIT person, that's a hard.
Yeah, no, I'm happy to chat with you, Juan Pablo. So I can put my my email in the chat.
Yeah, thank you, Robbie.
Thanks, Robbie.
Okay, James.
Hey there. Thanks a lot for the presentation. I just have a question about, so I'm a full-time clinician at the VA. Was talking to my supervisor about this and just wanted to get a little bit of clarification about some of the time commitments. I understand that we have the structured time that's going to be set aside for the program, but the additional time that's going to be need set aside for the program, how do clinicians generally navigate that? Is that something that just kind of happens outside of our structured tour, or is that something that actually gets built into our tour? How do other clinicians navigate that?
I'm going to we have a disproportionate number, it turns out, of availability by VA clinicians on tonight's call. So I'm guessing you're going to get multiple different kinds of answers. And maybe we'll start with Ravi on how you've managed it.
So in my case, I went to my supervisor, discussed this program and how it benefit my, my career goals. And we came to some alignment because I was already interested in innovation. And they were willing to support my time participating in the program, recognizing that, I would be available for those didactic portions, but the other work that needed to be done would be done on my own time. And they wanted to be clear that my clinical work would not, would continue, and that I would, meet those obligations. And so I think it is really important to have an early conversation with your supervisor and be upfront with them about it. It's helpful to have, if you have an innovation specialist who you can talk with, who can help you navigate some of those conversations before you have that initial one. I think it's very useful to go through that.
Does any other VA clinician want to speak to how you managed it?
I think I'd echo what Ravi said about your leadership has to get involved. I have an administrative component to my responsibilities, so I was able to get my work map tour mapped out to, instead of doing research, do an MIT. So what they did for me was they said, okay, well, we don't know what to call innovation, so we're going to call it research, and then we're going to go ahead and give you your work map. We'll give you a percentage to cover your work, and then that was very little of it. Predominantly after that was, on your own. My tour duty would end at 3:30. My team would have meetings later or very early, and then quite honestly, on Saturdays I would, like I heard others say, it's a hobby, it's fun. So I ended up, in the mornings working on it on Saturday or on a Sunday even, and that seemed to work fine. But your leadership has to protect your lecture component, and that's the part that they have to buy in on. As long as they do that, it's very doable.
Just to add to what's been said, so on paper, you have 0.2 FTEs that are protected by a memorandum of understanding between the program and the VA, but it becomes a situation of when you've seen one VA, you've seen one VA. So I think, it's fairly straightforward in most cases to secure the leadership protection for the didactics. But in reality, for the rest of it, I found that I was using evenings, weekends, holidays, and so forth, which when you enjoy doing something is something that you do. But if you come into this with the expectation that that 0.2 FT is going to be definitely guaranteed, it doesn't work that way, because you got to arrange with other fellows for when they can meet and so forth.
I would just say not every VA has used that MOU approach. So you've seen one VA, and I also just want to make sure, in case anybody's confused, there is an absolute mix of people from the VA and not VA, typically about 50-50 in the program. So though we have a disproportionate number of people here from the VA, if you're not from the VA, and this doesn't apply to you, it doesn't mean you're not suitable for the program.
That segues very well into a question that I'm going to combine in the chat before we get to Thomas, who has just raised his hand. But the question is, what is the background of people that you admit to the program? Are there career stages that are most desirable? Are people who have lots of experience still valued in innovation in the program?
Yeah. So if you look at our cohort over the years, they're people that range from being a graduate student or post undergrad, all the way through to people who have had several decades of professional experience in the academy, like Sherman. I don't know how many years, but it's more than 10, and in potentially in clinical. So we have had a range of professional age. And we do want the class to be diverse and along many dimensions. We've been fortunate that we don't sit and we have a quota like how many of this type and this type and this type, that we've had a diversity of applications, and it's tended to work out that if we take the people that seem like they're well positioned for the program, we end up with a diverse class. We are looking for people who have an interest in making a difference and doing things that have some background that's relevant, that seem, as much as you can tell from an application interview, are open to being mentored and to changing their mind and to working with other people. We have had applicants say, I want to do this project and this is what I want to do, and I have exactly the thing, and I'm looking for this to bring people onto my team. That would be an example of something that we'd say not suitable for the program, for example. So it's these subtle things. It's not anything that you can say, do I check this box or not check the box? And if you're further along, you bring a lot of experience. You also, which is great in terms of mentoring. Regardless of where you are, we're going to ask you why this might make a difference to your life, to your career, right? And which I think is important for anybody to think about if you're going to devote this kind of time, pick up this new hobby. I hadn't heard the hobby word before. Like, why?
Okay, Thomas, let's hear your question.
Hi, can you guys hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Great.
Yes.
Thank you so much for the presentation. Thank you for the clarification. I do have a question about, I have some experience with, the NSF I-Corps, Customer Discovery Program.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure how different it is from the NSF I-Corps kind of approach. Can you elaborate a little bit on that? Thank you.
Yeah. So the person that runs I-Corps, Beth at MIT, has been a Catalyst faculty. So the I-Corps is somewhat different. You come in with a specific idea generally, and then you're asked to go, depending on which level, you're asked to go interview, if you're not doing Spark, interview 100 people, and you have to normally have a group. But you do come in with something specific. In principle, that means you're finding the need, but in practice, you rarely move beyond that. So what has happened frequently, I mean, maybe not has often enough, is teams that become phase 2 have taken advantage of I-Corps as a mechanism to provide some structure for them to do even more interviewing and so forth, and to deal with those. So this starts right at the beginning and doesn't take as an assumption that you've got a technology that should just be set in stone or in a problem area.
That makes sense. Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.
I see we have another VA-oriented question, so I'm going to ask Gina to respond. The The question is, the VA has a Pathfinder program for innovators where it seeks to co-invent and co-design with innovators. Is this program a good opportunity to do the same and perhaps have a deeper collaboration? So I know that Catalyst is fairly unique among the VA innovation options, but perhaps you can elaborate on some of the differences between Catalyst and Pathfinder.
So yes, Pathfinder is really an opportunity for non-VA entities to partner with VA. So there's two paths to Pathfinder. The one is when you have a design or a prototype. I'll pick on Ravi for a second. So once his project's done and they need a place to, assuming it was outside the VA, they need a place to maybe pilot or test out their device before it hits the mass market, then you could go the route of Pathfinder to have a resource or patient access to run your pilot studies. That's one arm. The second arm of Pathfinder is to allow vendors an access point to basically sell their wares to the VA. So it's not necessarily an opportunity, that avenue is not an opportunity to co-design. If you're an existing VA employee, you are not going to apply to Pathfinder. So if you are, because I'm not sure who the message came from, but if you're a VA employee and you have a device idea, something to develop, then you really want to go into the innovation ecosystem. And if whoever asked that question, you want me to connect you with the right people, there's different opportunities through our various programming or one of our tech transfer offices that can help facilitate development of a device. If you're outside the VA, Pathfinder is an option. So it just depends on where that person might be sitting.
But Gina, it sounds like with Pathfinder, the people have ideas or
Yes.
or devices in the works, and that
Yes.
is not the case, explicitly not the case in Catalyst, that we really work from the unmet need point to find solution ideas.
Right.
So that's another important difference. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'm not seeing a lot of other questions, but there are in various forums questions about international candidates. So in particular, Mexico and Australia. So what I've tried to say in the chat is that while we don't have a policy prohibiting applications for international candidates, and we have had some fellows, it is very difficult for fellows to master the time zone differences. In Australia, I think would be particularly tough. I would also take this opportunity to let you know that we have a sister program in Europe that is about to open applications for a November 2024 start. The program has really intense collaboration. So I could let one of the fellows talk about the importance of people having availability.
I'd be happy to talk about that, Melissa,
Shared.
because I can share that in one of our problem groups that we were working on, we had two people who were based in Europe, who happened to live in the US but had moved to Europe at the point when they participated. But even that time difference made it incredibly hard to coordinate a time. Even within the US, sometimes the time differences can make quite a difference, right? Between people who are working Pacific versus East Coast time. And I will also share personally, like I had to travel during the course of this 6 months, and I was in India for 2 weeks. And I can tell you it was not pleasant. I did it, but I could not have done it for 6 months. I could do it for 2 weeks, but not for 6 months.
Thank you. If you have any other questions, please raise your hand. We're happy to stay on and answer them, but the silent room.
Hello.
Yes.
Yeah, I was the one who asked the question about the Pathfinder program. So interestingly, I found this program actually through the Pathfinder program. So I was playing on the VA's website because I was thinking about innovations with the VA, and then on the website I saw this program. So I was just wanting to understand the differences between the two programs because the way the Pathfinder for Innovation, and yes, I'm not referring to the vendor program. I was more referring to the innovation component. It seemed to be that in the innovation component, at least the way it was presented on the website, it was open to the VA working to co-innovate or help shape an idea that an innovator may have and maybe looking to provide a solution that may be relevant to the VA. So in the course of browsing around the website, when I saw the fellowship program, then I was, oh, okay, this seems to be a much more developed version of what I had read about on the Pathfinder website.
Yeah, I'd like to tackle that just by saying I echo what Melissa said about this. It's sort of two very different approaches to things. So the MIT Catalyst Fellowship is really working from the unmet need and solutioning from there, versus Pathfinder is really more coming with a set idea or prototype or a product and trying to bring it into the VA system. So both innovative programs, but very different approaches to how you do that.
Angela, I noticed I missed that you were here. So I just want to give a chance for another faculty to give your perspective. And you've sat on various arms of this program over the years. So
yeah, I was just thinking about.
Give your background as well. And tomorrow I'm going to ask you to do the same.
Okay, sure. So my name is Angela James. I am Vice President of Clinical Development at a biotech company that is born out of Belgium and headquartered in Boston. So I tend to go B2B quite a bit. And I've been I started off as an advisor on the IAP side of the Catalyst program and was so intrigued and felt like I wasn't seeing as much as I wanted to because we would only meet, I think IAP had 3 meetings or, and there was a lot that would develop between those times that we met with the fellows. And so I wanted to see more. I'm just, I call myself a sciencepreneur. As a scientist, the DNA, my DNA as a scientist, my mom is a scientist, my dad was a serial entrepreneur. I love the business of science. This was a perfect program for me to really see. And and mentoring people is like my passion. So it married all of my interests, but it allowed me to actually start thinking differently and expanded my perspective. And so I asked to be on the faculty side and was successful. And so this was my second year as a faculty member, and every year is different. I mean, I was just thinking that, I usually tell my mentees, it takes you about 3 years at a new job to really get up to speed and, be independent and don't have to ask who does what and so forth and really out there flying and developing. And so I'm thinking this third year is going to be the year where I feel like it all comes together. And but I really enjoyed it. I've enjoyed all the aspects, working with the fellows, both as the group or even in their smaller teams sometimes. I've had a chance last year to come and go in person. And so that was really nice. And so I couldn't make it this year. Work kept me from attending in person, but I will put this in my vacation block for next year. So I think it is very stimulating. I wish that something was like around like this when I was an undergrad, because I would have jumped on this, or even coming out of grad school, I would have jumped into this. And so I love it. I actually tell all of my, a lot of my mentees and people in my network about it, and I'm really looking forward to see what new ideas are going to come out of each year.
Thanks. And just to round out the diversity of who we have, Mara, talk about your background.
So I'm Mara Francis. I am actually an OB-GYN by training. I am currently a chief medical officer at a biotech startup in San Diego that is looking at early cancer detection with liquid biopsy. I came to Catalyst because of a potential food allergy contamination on a flight, and I happened to be sitting next to a Catalyst fellow who finished the program and had a startup company and was flying to South by Southwest. We got talking, and he asked me what I did and told me about his company, and he took my contact information and promptly gave it to Martha. And that led me to actually be a member of an IAP session, which that session happened to have a project that was GYN focused. And so I worked one-on-one with that group, and then was asked to be a faculty this year, which I have absolutely loved. When I actually, this is a fairly recent job for me, and I made sure to tell them I had blocked time on Monday and Wednesday, and that I wasn't giving it up. So I too love this program. I feel like I have learned as much as the fellows in my first year. It's exciting. It's a lot of emotions, right? Not always necessarily like the best emotions, because anything where you have to struggle is usually, it's like, you know, the fruit on the vine, it's always sweeter. But I think everybody in this program learns from each other and grows. And I have taken some of what I've been learning back to what I do in the startup world. And just the way I sort of look at my team and say, what is the problem that we are solving? And are we actually solving that problem, or are we maybe going a little off track? So I love it. It's definitely enriched my life and my career, and hope to be doing it for a long time.
I don't know if I missed any other faculty, please yell out. I'm an engineer. I've been at MIT for 30 years, always trying to do biomedical technology. But the thing that makes it work isn't any one of us, it's the community. It's 360 learning. So, you know, when you're joining a community. And one of the things that's also great about it is people tend to stick with the community, as I think you're hearing from these testimonials, which, you know, as I think Michelle said, you never know what, or Ga said, you don't know what people are going to say. So I appreciate your interest in learning about it. If that, any remaining questions? And you can, of course, reach out to us one-on-one if you want to prefer that way, or if you think of something later. It's a program that's not for everybody, but it's really terrific for lots of people. And if not, I want to thank the faculty and fellows for coming and taking the time to talk about your experience here, and to the potential applicants and people just interested in coming and listening to it and engaging. Great to meet you all.
Thank you to everyone who joined. Please feel free to reach out to me if there is anyone in the Catalyst community with whom you would like to connect. If you have any questions, also I put the link for our recruiting page into the chat. So please start your expression of interest and get right on top of your application. Thank you very much for joining. This is an important first step. And thank you to all of the faculty, fellows, and alumni who joined today. It's wonderful to see you. Really appreciate the support.
Bye.
Have a great night.
Bye.